Or
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And that's our snafu for the day. So it's clear sailing for the next hour and a half or 2 hours. So welcome to 2024 and to everybody on the Broadband Task Force. I'm going to hand it back over to Mark here to do some housekeeping and some welcomes, as well as saying goodbye to a member who's transitioning off. Mark will just transition right to public comments after that, and then I can take it from there. So with that, I'll hand it back to Mark.
Sounds good. Great to see everybody, and thanks for attending. Welcome to the Governor's Task Force on Broadband Access. Today is Wednesday, January 24th, 2024. I would just like to remind everyone that this is a public meeting that is being recorded. The meeting agenda is available on the Public Service Commission events calendar and also on the Task Force webpage. Also, in an effort to maintain audio quality, please mute yourself when not speaking. I also ask that any members of the public be mindful of their audio and remain unmuted throughout the duration of the meeting, other than during the public comment period. I'll go ahead and do a roll call for those that are members of the Governor's Task Force on Broadband Access. Bob Abrams.
Here.
Biko Baker. Kwame Barnes.
Here.
Marta Bechtel.
Here.
Brittany Beyer.
Here.
Sal Carranza.
Here.
Lori Collins, she already let me know she would not be in attendance. Doug Cox also let me know he wouldn't be in attendance. Angie Dickinson.
Here.
Emily Dittmar.
Here.
Russ Falkenberg.
Here, Mark.
Celeste Flynn.
Here.
Chris Herjong. Justin Hubner.
Here.
Gail Hike.
Here.
Barbara Kolos.
Hello.
Chris Meyer.
Here.
State Senator Mark Liner staff. Jose Martinez.
Present.
State Representative Mersauer staff. Nope, he let me know he might not be attending. So State Representative Radcliffe for staff. State Senator Path for staff. Rachel Shunlin.
Present.
Steve Schneider.
Present.
Mitchell Shula let me know she would also not be attending. Brett Schuttner.
Here.
Chet Streeb. And Chad Young.
Here.
I do not believe I missed anyone, but if I did, could you please let me know now? Okay, I'll keep an eye on the list. We have a new task force member joining us today. His name is Bob Abrams. Bob, would you want to give a brief introduction of yourself?
Of course. Bob Abrams. I have been a regulatory consultant specializing mostly in broadband and IP services for the past 15 years. I've recently retired. And so I have helped Wisconsin rural independents get about a dozen broadband grants in the last, in everything except the first cycle, whenever that was, 2016 or so. Yeah, also helping get state and federal broadband grants in other states. Before that, I had been a product manager for different kinds of voice services. If you remember long distance, 800 and calling card, then you're as old as I am. In addition to that, also done a lot of economic research for a bell company that is in Wisconsin. So I've been working with broadband since about 2005 and in the industry since about 1980. That's it. I'll take. I'm looking forward to being in this group. We have a lot of important work to do.
I agree. Glad to have you. So the other announcement was Jennifer Schilling. She's no longer on the task force. She left her position at Dairyland Power Cooperative. So, all right, Chris, you good if I go into public comment right away?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll take that as yes. All right. Now is the time where we allow for public comment. This is a sole opportunity for members of the public to make a comment during this meeting. Members of the public may soon unmute and make a public comment should they desire. I do ask that the public comment remain brief and also pertain to the subject of broadband access. You may also utilize the chat function in Zoom to let us know you would like to make a public comment as well. I will ask for public comment now. Second call for public comment. And last call for any public comment. Hearing none, as a note, written public comment is also accepted on an ongoing basis. We have direction on how to do so on our task force webpage, along with other information like meeting agendas, recording, and updates. I will hand it back to Chris to lead us through the rest of the agenda. Chris?
All right, thank you, Mark. The next item on the agenda is some updates from the Public Service Commission. I can lead off. Chair Volk was expected to be here today to talk about the work of the task force in 2023. She's unfortunately unable to make it today, but she does send her gratitude for the work that the task force completed throughout 2023. Next up, we have Alyssa to talk about updates to BEAD, Digital Equity, and Capital Project Fund. Alyssa.
Thank you, Chris. And I just wanted to sort of reiterate that Chair Bach had really hoped to be here today had she not been ill. And if folks have not heard or did not read in the news, Chair Bach resigned her position as the chair of the Public Service Commission. And her last day as chair is next Friday, February 2nd. Governor Evers has appointed Commissioner Summer Strand, who is a current PSC commissioner, to be the new chair of the commission, basically effective the same day. So Chair Bach's last day is next Friday, and Summer Strand will be the new chair of the Public Service Commission. And I know Chair Bach really wanted to be here today, but I just sort of on her behalf, and if any of her staff want to jump in directly, broadband was incredibly important to her, and just the work that this task force does, kind of driving those efforts, and also just helping to be a voice, an advocate, and sort of expanding kind of the outreach efforts of the commission and the office, and really helping drive broadband access, affordability, and adoption throughout the state has just been deeply appreciated by her, and was really, she's sad not to be here. So I won't do any more, but if you want to reach out to her, she just will have a wisconsin.gov address for not too much longer. And now I'm going to do the regular PSC updates after that one. So I just wanted to let folks know that you've probably or hopefully heard of the Affordable Connectivity Program. This was part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. It was a benefit program that provides a $30 discount for certain eligible low-income households, households generally at 200% of poverty. And the funding is now estimated to be depleted in April. And so it's not a commission program, it's a federal communications program. But earlier this month, the Federal Communications Commission, not us, basically put out what's called a wind down order. And so they told internet service providers, many of which were on this call, to start basically notifying their customers that this benefit will end in April. Actually, I believe tomorrow is the day that they have to send their first notice to customers by. And so I just wanted to make sure task force members are aware. It's an affordability program that, this task force has recommended. This task force has, put in their recommendations about expansion and et cetera, but basically without essentially immediate action by federal Congress to add funding, the program will end in April. So just a ACP, we call it the ACP in our office. It's the Affordable Connectivity Program. It's the $30 sort of discount for low-income families on internet service will be ending soon, and potentially people will be getting notices in the mail or via email tomorrow from their internet service providers if they didn't get them earlier this week. That's the first update from our office that we just wanted to make sure task force members were aware of, because affordability and expansion of that program has been a task force recommendation. Secondly, the Capital Projects Fund. So the commission is managing or administering two capital project fund grant projects. One of them is called Broadband Infrastructure, and it looks largely similar to other broadband expansion programs the commission has operated. The applications closed back in November. They're under review, and they'll go in front of the commission late winter or early spring. And so we would, see basically awards being made by the commission for those broadband infrastructure awards yet this year, and construction can go through 2026. So more broadband infrastructure coming through that. In December, when the task force did not meet, the governor and Senator Baldwin announced that the state was also issuing $33 million for Digital Connectivity and Navigators program. And so this program will be also administered by the Public Service Commission, and it's to put Wi-Fi in apartment buildings. It's to do device programs for households that don't have access to sort of the right device. And then it's to support the deployment of digital navigators to those households who are getting basically the Wi-Fi or the devices. And so again, it aligns with a lot of the task force recommendations. It includes digital navigators, which has been a key task force recommendation from the first and the second report. It talks about getting people the devices they need that are internet enabled. Again, that was talked about in the first task force report. And then this building Wi-Fi is really about those lower income housing and making sure that affordability is there in certain apartment buildings. So again, that sort of all three parts of this grant program kind of align with different task force recommendations in the last three reports. The commission is currently working to stand up the program, basically scope it, make sure that we understand the details, but we expect applications to open again, that sort of mushy time in Wisconsin between late winter and early spring, which, can mean lots of months. So that is our hope. The last thing I wanted to update before we move into sort of more of the technical presentation from staff is BEAD. BEAD is the Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment. It's that big federal program, and the state of Wisconsin submitted both Volume 1 and Volume 2 of our initial proposal. So basically, how we're going to figure out which locations are eligible and how we'll do our subgranting. We submitted both of those to the federal government, NTIA, at the end of December, or we submitted Volume 1 in November and Volume 2 in December, and both are just under review. So they're in kind of this like curing question review back and forth to get the final details worked out so we can get approval and start moving. But both of them are in the review stage. So unfortunately, we don't have any great updates or new timelines on the BEAD program. Likewise, with the Digital Equity Plan, it was submitted to NTIA in December, and we are just in sort of the final stages of curing and approval with that plan. So a lot of the planning work we did in 2023, we're sort of anticipating starting, but we can't quite start till we have federal approval. So we're really anxious to get those and work closely with our federal partners at NTIA to have everything approved so we can start digital equity capacity and implementing BEAD in our state. So those are the many updates from our office. Before maybe I pivot over to Rory, if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to take them or tee up somebody else in the office.
Just one comment, Alyssa. A bipartisan bill to extend the Affordable Connectivity Plan should be released today for an additional $7 billion. That would continue the program as is, $30 if you're low income, $75 if you're on tribal lands. So if it's bipartisan today, that's good. If it doesn't get done today, there are other political issues always. So that might be good news.
Yes, the ACP Extension Act. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you, Bob. That's exactly the question I was going to ask from Alyssa. What happens with the program moving forward? So thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, I will say there are a lot of demands on the federal budget right now, and a lot of pressures to fund the government right now. So I think it's a great act. I hope it's an important program, but I don't know if the word bipartisan means it gets passed.
Right.
So
I wanted to mention, thank you for bringing that up, Bob. CWA also has a flyer that we're putting out. I wanted to know if it was okay to send it to our group. It's a flyer with a QR code on the bottom, which is basically a petition to let our government know in Wisconsin to renew and extend the ACP funding program. Is that something that I could send and that everybody would be comfortable filling out or at least looking at?
yes, you're welcome to send it. I would say everyone can make their own decision based on their interests, jobs, and restrictions about it if they follow up. But
Absolutely.
I always welcome task members to share any broadband related materials with other task force members.
Yeah, just with the only proviso being, and Alyssa's right to point to political issues, even with bipartisan initiatives. The last day that a provider can sign up somebody for ACP is February 7th. So it's going to be a short fuse.
Melissa, we have a question in the chat from Lucas Nip. Could capital infrastructure grants awards come in Q2?
Yes. Yeah, that's late winter, early spring. Yes. Okay.
Any other questions for Alyssa?
Well, maybe I could pass it over to Rory to talk about federal funding program. Thank you. I'm gonna.
Do you guys see my screen okay?
We can.
Okay, as if we hadn't talked about enough programs and enough acronyms, let's maybe talk through a couple more. So, in the context of what Alyssa was talking about and all the things our broadband office is working on, capital projects, BEAD, state grants, ARPA grants, all these other things, there's also just a giant pile of money and a lot of work going on at the federal level, administered by federal government agencies, doing broadband deployment in Wisconsin. And so I think we heard from task force members over the last couple months that, BEAD's great. We like BEAD. We're looking forward to BEAD, but like, what else is going on? And can you fill us in a little bit? So we've got some great speakers coming later here talking about some of their work with federally administered funds. But just to start us off and get everybody on the same page, we thought we'd just do a little overview of some of the federal broadband funding that's moving around in Wisconsin that the PSC and our office is not responsible for and kind of more administered by the federal government instead. So I'll start with where we always start, which is where are we at, where are we headed? Right now, the most recent update of the National Broadband Map, kind of our best estimate of locations in need of more help and more deployment money in Wisconsin, about 420,000 locations lack access to 100 by 20 in kind of the BEAD definition. So of that 420,000, there's about 223,000 that lack 25 by 3. 25 by 3 would be kind of the orange areas of this map. Kind of the blue would be those in the 25 by 3 to 100 by 20. So certainly lots of work to do. And the good news is there's also a lot of work that's in progress. We have funding in hand, distributed. Providers and folks all the time are working really hard to build fiber and put up towers to deploy internet all over Wisconsin right now. Even if we did not do a single thing more, there would be a lot still progressing. So with that, here is a little table we pulled together with the caveat that this is the best estimate that we're getting from NTIA and FCC. It's a muddy table and it's not totally exactly pinned down accurate yet, but we're still working with those federal agencies to get better numbers for BEAD implementation. But this is kind of a listing of kind of 4 main federally administered programs that are also having a big impact in Wisconsin. The first one, Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program, that's administered by the NTIA. Then there's RDOF, Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, that's an FCC administered program. Enhanced ACAM, that's also FCC administered. And then lastly, USDA Reconnect. So across all of those grants, you can see in this table, our best estimate, and I'm going to say it again, our best estimate, kind of our draft number that we're hearing from the federal government, is that that's covering about 173,000 locations that are currently un and underserved. So of those 420,000 locations, about 174,000 are in progress. And so will be completed under one of these federal government programs. So that's a big bite of the pie, and we're really thrilled about that. There's certainly lots of complexity to getting those programs ongoing and over the hurdle, but I think a really nice overview that there's a lot of money going on and a lot of money being deployed right now as well. So with that, I'll just talk briefly through each of these programs, just give you some overview on what they look like, how they vary a little bit. Certainly happy to answer any questions once we get kind of the end of this presentation. So one of the big ones we're going to talk about more specifically with our panel today is Enhanced Alternative Connect America Cost Model, EACAM. It's quite a bundle of words, but at a really high level, it's a program operated by the FCC that's kind of I would say a new generation program, a transition from some of the older cost model supported programs that FCC operated. And what they've done is, you may be familiar with the CAF program or the original ACAM program or some of their affiliates. Those programs, the CAF program was focused on mostly getting folks in Wisconsin access to 10x1 service. And the old ACAM programs were mostly focused on getting folks access to 25x3 service. FCC has taken a look and made some determinations and wanted to, with their universal service funding, transition a lot of these older programs in some of these older areas to get upgrades now, not just to 25x3, but to 100x20. And so they enacted kind of and through an order this enhanced ACAM program. And so it's transitioning a lot of those older ACAM awards and a lot of those older ACAM and associated areas to this. And what we're going to get for it, we're going to give them a little more money, but we're going to start building 100x20, which is really just a great opportunity to make that deployment all at once to that higher speed. So the build timeline, the way it's structured, the goal is 50% of locations need to be built by the end of 2026, ramping up to 100% by the end of 2028. And so if you see on the right side here, really pretty dispersed throughout Wisconsin, but tend to be more of those more rural, more difficult to reach, more sparsely served areas of the state. And so any provider that's opted in to participate into the EIACAM program, and you can see the list right here, any provider that's opting to participate, all of their previous ACAM areas that they were receiving funding for, they're saying, yes, I will upgrade them to 100x20. And so really a comprehensive build out for those providers within those exchange territories, you can kind of see on the map. Primarily what we've been hearing from providers, although we don't have the full story yet, primarily what we're hearing is most all of that deployment will be 100x20, actually much faster than 100x20. It'll be fiber to the home, fiber to the premises deployments. Providers have some flexibility to use other technologies, just depending on kind of the actual realities on the ground. And we're working to pin down that. But for the most part, most all the locations we're talking about in Wisconsin for EACAM will be fiber. So really long-term solution for a lot of folks. That's EACAM. Next, I'll talk about RDOF. RDOF, you all probably are quite more familiar with. We've had it around for a couple of years. It was kind of an auction-based system, FCC put together based on census blocks and let providers kind of step up and say, hey, we'd like to serve these areas. And a pretty complex, really game-changing allocation that they did several years ago. Here's a map of RDOF. In Wisconsin, every provider who won for RDOF committed to the gigabit tier. And that's gigabit down up to 500 megabits up. So really entirely fiber deployment within Wisconsin in these RDOF areas. This table down here is a little bit out of date. It moves around a little bit just as the actual reality on the ground gets sorted out. But it's about $180 million, covering about 150,000, 145,000 locations. You will note a couple providers are not on this list who previously were. You may be familiar with LTD Broadband. That was one of the providers who won a very significant amount of locations and funding in the state of Wisconsin in the initial auction. But the way the auction was operated by FCC, eventually FCC determined that LTD just didn't have the capacity from a financial and managerial perspective to kind of execute the award. So they basically withdrew that award from LTD. So a really unfortunate situation from Wisconsin, and there's plenty of opportunities to fix that through other funding sources, but we're really excited about about $180 million coming into Wisconsin here. There's about there's the build requirement, and the timeline is a 6-year build deployment timeline, and it depends a little bit on when FCC kind of made the final authorized payment to any given provider. But for the most part, that's the end of 2028 in the state of Wisconsin. All right. That's RDOF. And then some smaller but still mighty programs in Wisconsin. There's also the USDA Reconnect program. We've got 2 main grantees in Wisconsin. The first is Entera, about a $3.3 million grant, actually several years ago now, building up kind of in the Eau Claire, Chippewa County area. You'll see that on the left. And then also Reedsburg Utility Commission, very recently within the last year, got a $28 million loan for a lot of their work in kind of Sauk County and kind of up near Reedsburg area, their main territory. These deployments will be pretty much entirely fiber. We are aware that there is a little bit more USDA money out there that might be coming down the pipeline. It's just not really certain exactly when that money will be allocated, but we will wait and see and hopefully get some more for Wisconsin. Lastly, I'll talk about the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program. This program is administered by NTIA. It's really focused on making sure we have allocations of funding for our tribal neighbors, focused primarily and almost entirely on tribal reservation land, serving tribal communities. It's a really separate program operated by NTIA. It's competitive throughout the entire US. So far in Wisconsin, about $37 million has been awarded to our tribal members. Not quite all of our tribal neighbors have gotten them, but most all of them. It'll primarily be some fiber, some fixed wireless. It just depends on kind of the deployment and the nature of any given deployment project, but also a really big impact. And I think several thousand locations for these tribal lands. So I think a real game changer for our tribal partners. So with that, I think that's pretty much the overview on all of our federal funds that PSC is not administering that I think are going to make a big impact. I will say, just as a wrap up, I think going back to the first page, our overall goal, within the BEAD program is this internet for all, right? What does that mean? Well, we're trying to get those blue and orange areas completely turned to purple. And so I think as we step forward into the BEAD process and into the next couple of years, I think the real challenge for our office and the state of Wisconsin and folks on this call is to find a way to pair all these federal funds I just talked about with BEAD funds, with potentially some more state funding, and obviously a significant private investment to kind of fill in the map. I kind of, get out your coloring book and fill in all the corners of the map with good high quality internet. And so as we move forward, I think a key thing for the task force to think about is how can we pair other funding with these federal funds to make sure we're filling in the map. And I think so far we're excited about these federal funds. They're a big piece of the pie, and certainly nearly 200,000 locations, which makes a big difference. With that, maybe I'll just open up for some questions. Anything anybody interested in learning a little bit more about? I will say we have a panel of experts on these programs who are working to build them, so I'll certainly defer to them for some of these questions, but just maybe 1 or 2 quick questions if anyone has them. Great, Mark.
There's a question here. There's a question here.
Say again?
There's a question here in the chat from Lucas Nip. How do those who deny internet service based on religious reasons factor into internet for all?
Lucas, that's a good question. I don't know that there's a definitive answer, but I think that the goal of the program is to get internet service to all folks who are interested in receiving it. So I know we're aware of some, Amish communities, some more traditional members in Wisconsin who maybe aren't necessarily interested in deployment to their home. Certainly, we're not going to require anyone to receive deployment. So I think that's something that's not quite ironed out, but, certainly we will be respectful of folks' wishes when we're talking about deployment.
There probably isn't a survey mechanism that identifies those people on a statistical basis, but if you're, based on what Rory's saying, there may be a way to make manual adjustments based on geography, based upon a survey that does get sent out. In the future, it's not out. There is no animal like that today.
Yeah,
Yeah, and obviously we have been talking a lot about adoption. I mean, deployment doesn't mean adoption. They have a choose not to adopt, and we just have to take that into account, correct?
absolutely. So, when we're talking about internet for all and BEAD deployment, we're really focused on making sure that there's access available to folks. I think both a barrier and an opportunity, like Sal said, is that adoption component. And I think we'll have to see a little bit how things play out over the next couple of years.
I just want to chime in and say Rachel has her hand up. The color of the hand in her background makes it hard to see, so I just wanted to make sure we hadn't missed it.
Aha.
Rachel?
Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, really detailed information in those slides. Thank you. I wanted to make sure I understood or that correctly. Any areas that were supposed to be RDOF will still make it into the BEAD Volume 1 locations?
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me explain a little more. So when we're talking about the BEAD program, really the mandate is internet for all, but the feds and frankly everyone doesn't want to spend our time and money deploying more funds where there's already funds deployed. So for the most part, when we're talking about RDOF, Enhanced ACAM, USDA Reconnect, Tribal Broadband Connectivity, if there is funds or state broadband grants, ARPA broadband grants, capital projects, all these programs, if there's been funds allocated to build broadband to a location for the BEAD program through the kind of the state challenge process, which we don't really need to get into, but happy to have that conversation, we're going to take those locations off the map. If you are not currently served by high-speed internet, 100 by 20 broadband, but we know there's an RDOF build coming down your road, or you're in an ACAM area or something like that, we're not going to allocate BEAD money to your location. You're already set. You're good to go. You're probably going to get the money, get that deployment a little bit faster than BEAD. So if you're being built by one of these programs, you're not going to be involved in the BEAD process.
Thank you, Rory. And I guess my question was more specifically for areas that were supposed to get RDOF funding but are no longer going to receive that build out.
Are some of those areas that won an LTD award, for example, certainly those are eligible for BEAD, and I think there's a lot of interest to make sure that those areas are not left behind despite some kind of unfortunate results of the auction process. So anyone that has gotten an LTD award will certainly be eligible for BEAD for the most part. All right, Chris, Mark, I think I scared everybody off with enough acronyms. Maybe we can start moving on to the next thing.
Certainly. And we're going to keep talking about acronyms because our next item on the agenda is ACAM and RDOF panel with some of our members of the task force. So on the ACAM side, we've got panelists Angie Dickinson and Justin Hubner. And on the RDOF side, we've got Brett Schupner. So we've got 5 minutes for each of them to kind of talk about what they're doing in their world in regards to these things. And then we'll have 30 minutes for question and answers with the panel. And to start off, I'll ask, we've got several questions in the agenda that we can start with as others think of questions that they would like to ask as well. But I can hand things back over to Angie, Justin, and Brett now to walk through some introductions and more information about their area.
Thank you, Chris. Do you want us to do introductions first and then do our 5 minutes, or go right into our 5 minutes? I don't want.
Let's do a brief introduction, especially for those who are a little newer to the task force. They know who everyone is.
Sure. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Angie Dickinson. I'm the State Government Affairs Manager at TDS Telecom.
I'm Justin Hubner. I look like I'm in the Matrix right now for some reason because the lighting is a little weird in the room I'm in, but I'm the CEO at Solaris. We're right in the center part of the state, Wisconsin Rapids area, Wood County, that area.
Good afternoon. I'm Brett Schupner, General Manager, Leesburg Utility Commission.
Okay, great. I will get us started, and I'm okay to share my screen, I hope. hopefully you're seeing my screen. I just have a couple of slides, but just to give a visual. As I said, I'm Angie with TDS Telecom. TDS has been doing business in Wisconsin since 1967 and owns 21 telephone companies in our state, all doing business as TDS Telecom. TDS Telecom is a leading provider of high-speed internet, TV, and phone services to rural and suburban communities across the U.S. and is a subsidiary of Telephone and Data Systems Incorporated. With 1.2 million connections, TDS Telecom delivers up to 8 gig fiber internet speeds, TV entertainment solutions, and advanced voice services to customers in 31 states. TDS Telecom employs more than 3,500 people nationwide, many of them right here in Wisconsin, where our company is headquartered. I'll give you a quick snapshot of enhanced ACAM and what it means to TDS in Wisconsin. On September 28th of last year, TDS announced that it would double down on its commitment to improve rural broadband by accepting enhanced ACAM offers in 24 states. TDS committed to deploying high-speed internet in the next 4 years to more than 270,000 locations in these states. And TDS will receive approximately $1.3 billion of enhanced ACAM support over the next 15 years. In addition, TDS has reaffirmed our commitment to consumer adoption by offering low-cost or no-cost connectivity through the Federal Affordable Connectivity Program. TDS has approximately 60,000 enhanced ACAM locations in Wisconsin. The map on the left depicts the serving areas for our Wisconsin companies. It's important to note that enhanced ACAM also includes dollars for continued support and maintenance. That's attractive to us because we typically wouldn't get support or maintenance funding with state or federal broadband grants. Enhanced ACAM is predictable funding that we can count on. Although the FCC's enhanced ACAM order is technology neutral, TDS is unwavering in its dedication to expanding the capacity of our fiber to the home networks in our wireline markets. TDS's current plans are to build fiber to our enhanced ACAM locations and offer speeds in excess of 100 by 20, including multi-gig speed offerings. TDS is grateful for the support from the FCC, and we look forward to taking this next crucial step forward in closing the digital divide in Wisconsin. Thank you.
All right, I can jump in quick next, and I was gonna share, if you want to stop sharing, Angie, I could maybe just share I was gonna share the state broadband map real quick. Or actually, yeah.
Sorry.
And I can give my introduction here quick. So Solaris is, like I said, located in central Wisconsin. I'll pull up the map here in a second just to highlight some of the resources that the PSC has out there that are publicly available on that side. But we are about 17,000 total customers, and we've been around for 128 years. You know, started obviously as a phone provider. We have about 115 staff in the state of Wisconsin, and we own really 2 different areas in here. So I'm gonna just do a screen share. I'll share this one here. All right. So again, just highlighting, you know, some of the things that are available as part of the Wisconsin Broadband Office. This is a map that you can all go out to that has a lot of information on it. I'll layer on a couple different piece parts of it, but for right now, you can see kind of, we ultimately are the reddish orange color here. Kind of, this would be our outline of our Wood County area. And then we also have a separate ILEC that is the Manawa area here, which is just north of Wapaka. So those are the 2 areas that we have elected enhanced ACAM, and those are the 2 main areas we operate in. We do expand outside of our borders and have built out to additional areas, but these are, you know, kind of the traditional areas that, you know, back when phone was a monopoly, we were given these service areas, and then obviously, you know, things have turned to internet. But, you know, with this, you know, for us, it's about 30,000 locations that are spread between those 2 areas. and we're specifically getting support on about 9,000 of those locations. So the way that ACAM is done is that it doesn't give you support for areas that are too low cost, in the sense that there is a business case to be able to serve those without any government support. The support that they give you is for the areas that are in the more rural areas, where ultimately you need that additional support to make the business case make sense. And so for us, like I said, that's approximately a third of our service territory. And again, it's the more rural areas. We have a lot of customers like in Wisconsin Rapids, Nakusa, Port Edwards, but in those areas where there's less population and less density, those are the areas that we get the support on. So for us, I guess one of the things I thought made sense to talk about is how we plan to move forward with this. So for one of the layers that you can turn on the map is, kind of the map that Rory was showing earlier. Oops, let me grab coverage. There we go. And if I tweak this one off, it's kind of some of the same color scheme that we were seeing before, but in this map, purple is good, blue is getting not quite as good, and then orange is the areas that are in most need. And so you can see, if I were to toggle the thing on and off, that ultimately in the Wisconsin Rapids, our original service territory, we've got a lot of purple because we built out fiber to the home. Over the last 10 years, we've been investing about $10 million a year to build out that fiber, but we still have some work in our Manawa area. You can see kind of the southeast portion of Manawa that we've got that area built out. This map is, it's going to be coming up on a year old here in June, and the data is a little bit delayed when it comes and gets filed. We have to file this data twice a year, but we have built out more areas here this last year, and then we will finish our fiber build for the Manawa exchange this summer. So we'll get all the mainline fiber in, and then just have to finish up with installs into customers' homes in 2025. So for us, we've taken this funding and used it as the opportunity to build fiber to the home in all of the service areas that we're picking up as part of Enhanced ACAM. Now, again, we get funding. It's really a 15-year program for this build out, but we've taken on debts in order to be able to get to fiber quicker. And so, as Angie said, ultimately it creates some funding for us that continues to allow us to pay off that fiber that we've already made the investment on, and it was able to encourage us to get the last of the fiber in here very early in the process, so that we can ultimately serve speeds up to again, the current technology we have will get us to that 8 gig, just like Angie had said as well. So but that's kind of the background from a Solaris perspective, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing here quick and wait for people's questions after Brett goes.
All right, this my turn now. I'll try to do a share here also, just 2 slides on reads for utility / light speed. I'm gonna have to do a death by PowerPoint here, but basically little bit of history about reads for utility / light speed. So we're pretty unique in the state of Wisconsin, as we're one of the few municipally owned fiber optic utilities. Really unique in the fact that we offer triple play of service. There's a couple others out there I know that might be fiber and stuff like that, but basically we're the electric water utility for the city of Reedsburg. We began that in 1894 up until about late 1990s. We were looking to connect up all our substations and wells and reservoirs and stuff like that to have better connectivity and operate a SCADA system and stuff like that. Tried to work with the local providers at that time, and nobody wanted to do fiber for us. So since nobody would do it for us, we did it on our own. And then once we did that, some local businesses, the school district, and that heard about our adventure and asked, hey, how can you help us out do that too? And so we worked with the local school district and few businesses, and all of a sudden we were providing fiber service in the city of Reedsburg. That continued to grow to the point that the city decided they wanted a full type citywide fiber system. So that project took off in 2003. Once the city was completely built out, and we looked at the outlying rural areas. So
Hey,
then
Brett,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. You're a little hard to hear, at least for me. I don't know if there's anything, we can hear you, or I can hear you, but it's hard. I don't know if you can get closer to your mic or make sure it's on right. I think I'm not the only one, but it's just like a little muffled and a little quiet. And if not, I think we can make do, but if you could speak up a little, and I don't know, but it's a little hard to hear, and you're saying such good stuff.
Is this
Sorry.
any better? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, I had the wrong mic selected, so yes, I believe it was hard to hear. Anyway, so back to so back in, I guess, does anything need to be repeated, or are you okay?
No.
Okay, so our rural expansion started in 2011. As we continue to improve, upgrade equipment, and that we were the first to offer a gig internet service in 2014 in the state of Wisconsin. 2018, we made gig symmetrical our standard speed. That was the only speed we offered at that time. And then in 2022, we started offering our 10 gig service. So like any other internet provider, typical plate of services we offer. But basically, like I said, we offer our gig symmetrical service, and we do offer a 10 gig symmetrical service. It is kind of unique and funny that customers will actually ask if we offer anything slower. Yeah, so I imagine you don't hear that too often. But we do offer TV and phone services and similar business services. So here's our current map. So kind of where we're located in the state of Wisconsin. And then green is our current service area. And then any of the other colored areas are our expansion areas that we are working on. And as our growth, as we continue to build out, this kind of shows our growth over the years. So that 2009, 11, that was basically just city services. And then as we continue to go out in the rural areas, that was that little bump there. We saw a lot of growth once we implemented the gig standard. It was just, we had a lot of customer growth with that deployment. And then as we continue to build out, our customer growth continues to grow. Just how we've continued to do that growth is through our funding opportunities. So we did get a USDA broadband grant back in 2011 for our rural expansion. The RDOF, $6.4 million. That's what we'll be talking about more here. We've received 14 broadband grants for $14.2 million. We've received funding from local partnerships of 1.4, and then most recently our $28 million loan which is a 2% loan for 26 years. Some of our local partners, Sauk County, Iowa County, are a couple big ones, and local townships. And another thing kind of unique to us is we do operate our own fiber crews. We run a crew of anywhere from 12 to 15 employees, and we do 100% of our work when we can. Right now, we have so much work that we have to hire some contractors to keep up. So, and just quickly, types of construction methods. Now off to the RDOF, Reedsburg Utility is the yellow area on this map. You can see how it's kind of all choppy. And that was because that RDOF was deployed in census block groups where they grouped together census blocks as funding units. It was really kind of a difficult to figure out how you connect all those census block groups up into a network. But we did end up winning 21 census block groups, which encompassed nearly 4,500 locations. How RDOF was, I guess I'm not going to sugarcoat it. RDOF was a very poorly run program. Basically, you had to pre-qualify and then you were eligible to bid. So I feel like hindsight, they should have put a lot more effort into that pre-qualification because they allowed basically entities to bid that then they did not approve. And those entities that bid probably really drove down the cost of that funding. So like that pale green areas are those LTD areas that surrounded us, that LTD one. So how RDOF was out, it was a reverse auction. So basically the FCC set a price point that said this is 100% funding for this census block group. Of the area we won, 100% funding would have been $31.1 million. And then basically providers had to bid at what percent can you, of that 100% funding, can you complete these projects for? And you kept bidding a lower and lower percentage until you were the only one left. So a lot of our areas cleared at 20% funding. Well, if we were bidding against our LTD and now they're no longer eligible, you know, they probably, I'm pretty confident they drove down that percentage quite a bit for most of the providers that won RDOF in our state. So basically our areas cleared at 20 or 30% of the maximum funding. And so we're going to get a total of $6.4 million total over the next 10 years. So it's $643,000 a year we're getting to complete these projects or this project area. But we have 6 years to complete it. So it's kind of a, you know, complete it and then you get the funding at later years. So you have to find other funding sources to get the project done in the meantime. And one impact that we could I'll talk about more will be about the impacts of inflation on that project, but I guess I'll save that for now.
All right. Well, thank you. So now this brings us to the panel discussion for the next 30 minutes. We have an opportunity to ask questions of the three panelists. And as we contemplate some questions for the group, I can kick off with one. And Brett, you mentioned this on that very last slide. I was actually looking at very quickly as you showed it, because you were talking about the rising costs of inflation on fiber. And specifically for fiber, for all three of you, what is your commitment or what are your plans around preference for fiber for these deployments versus other technologies? How are you navigating that?
Chris, I can start. I mentioned in my intro, TDS is committed to expanding fiber to our EACAM location. So I would imagine that will be the bulk of our EACAM build out.
Yeah, and for Solaris, as I kind of presented, so we're planning to serve all of ours with fiber to the home, and the biggest thing for us is that allows us to really future-proof it. So ACAM originally was launched as a 25/3 requirement, but by going straight to fiber, that allowed us to position ourselves with the enhanced ACAM being 100/20. Fiber, you know, obviously easily serves that requirement as well. So you know, even though the FCC a lot of times, you know, will slowly change that definition of what broadband is, you know, the benefit of fiber is that it is the most robust and, you know, most future-proof option in that situation. So, you know, for us this year, we're changing a lot of our homes that'll take them from 1 gig to the possibility of, you know, it's officially 10 gigs, but you got a little bit of overhead on that. So it's about 8 gigs in total, but you're able to do that without putting a cloud in the ground in the future. And that is, you know, one of the big benefits of fiber. And it doesn't look, at least today, there's no theoretical limit on that because we haven't reached the capacity of what they can put over that fiber, and there's continued growth in the future.
Yeah, and we started out 100% fiber optic, so we are continuing that. We're not going to move backwards. And then also part of the in the RDOF auction, you had to bid in tiers. and we bid in the gig tier. So we were approved based on providing gig service.
All right, thank you. Questions from the group. I've got some additional questions in the agenda if we don't have any, but I want to give everybody an opportunity to ask their questions. While we look for that next person here. Oh, here's one from a friendly face, Jaron. There are some areas across Wisconsin that have overlapping ACAM areas. What happens if two providers have overlapping ACAM areas? Would both providers end up building those areas? And I think that could be for any of you or all of you.
So officially the locations won't overlap. So, a good example is Solaris and Angie, we border up against each other on the west side on that side. So those have been tough in past federal funds because, as Brett mentioned, a lot of times to do federal funds based on census blocks in that situation. And so then we have what are called split census blocks, where a census block is served by two providers. In this situation, the FCC is going through a process similar to what the state's been doing, where they will, over the next about year, they will clean up all the locations, and we have a specific location count that we're assigned. And so those won't be double counted in any form or fashion between the providers. They'll, we can go through a challenge process to make sure that they get assigned to the right one, but they won't be double covered. They won't get double billed or double covered from a funding mechanism in that situation. But I don't know, Angie, any additional details you want to add on that?
Well said, as always, Justin.
Yeah, thank you. Questions from the group? I'm going to keep coming back to the group. Otherwise, another question that we had in the agenda, what are some of the challenges you're facing as you implement some of these projects? And you each touched on some of this a little bit in your presentation. I know inflationary pressures is one that we just talked about. What are some of those pressures you're facing, those obstacles you're facing, and what are you doing to mitigate those? And maybe as a separate or an aside to that, are any of those issues regulatory, and are there things that this group can discuss and maybe take action on?
I guess I can start on this one because I had kind of led up to it a little bit with a slide there, but and I could share it if you want to, but otherwise I can just kind of give the highlights there. Is basically when we bid on that RDOF auction, that was late 2020, our project estimate for that entire build out area was about $30.4 million. And that's what we based our bidding off of. And even at that time, we thought we were estimating pretty conservatively to have a little, knowing that, there was a lot of funds that were going to be out there and a lot of providers, going after the same resources of fiber materials, duct and fiber and stuff like that. Since we were approved for that, and then through the whole COVID and now through all the additional funding that's going on there, it's really put pressure on supply chain and really drove up inflation on our fiber optic materials. Our latest estimate on that same project is over $50 million. And we're not providing service to an additional customer based on that extra, basically $12 million or $22 million it's going to cost us to build this out. Part of that increase is a little bit due to, we've had to figure out ways to mitigate the inflation. And by the one way we did that is through the USDA Reconnect program that we applied for a 2% loan to help keep our interest payments down. So with that loan, there's a lot of red tape associated with that. And so we have a lot more legal fees and engineering fees and stuff like that we would not have had if we didn't go through these federal programs. So, but I guess, that's been one of the biggest challenge with winning our funding through RDOF. There's kind of some of the additional things that are associated with that drive up costs. Is there's letter of credit requirements, which we have to annually renew, which are costly, and you have to have funds available for those. And then environmental reviews and just items like that, that really in the long run do not provide a better experience or provide any better service to the customer, but just drive up cost. So.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, I mean, I think that's the biggest pressure right now is, you know, especially with BEAD dollars coming, there is going to be kind of, you know, we all experience inflation outside of this industry, but in this industry, there will be, you know, basically hyperinflation because, you know, the one of the things that we just can't expand very quickly is the number of crews that are able to plow and bore fiber in the ground. And that's, you know, really the first step towards any construction process. So we've been lucky that we've worked with a long-term partner on that, but, you know, the costs really do, I think they're going to get a lot worse just with the amount of demand and the amount of dollars coming to the table, where ultimately, you know, those crews are going to work for whoever can pay the most, because there's a finite amount of them available to all of us. And then I think the other challenge that always comes into place is, you know, we live in Wisconsin. And so, you know, this isn't specific to our EACAM area, but a state grant that we're working on right now. We were actually hoping to get it done the same year that we got the grant application, but, you know, we didn't get any rain in the summer. We got a ton in the fall. So that delayed some work that we had to have done with the railroads, railroad crossing. You know, then in that situation, the fees for railroad crossings in the fall double in price after you get past a certain date, which happened because of the rains. And then because we have areas in our territory that are great for plowing fiber because it's a lot of sand country, and then we have areas along the Wisconsin River which are a block of granite. And so in that situation, we tried to bore that railroad crossing twice, brought in the biggest machinery that you can do, and now we'll be subcontracting with a specialist to go back in and try it again in the spring. But you incur those permitting costs for each of those attempts, and so in a situation wherein if everything would have gone right, we would have probably been able to hook up another, you know, 100 people last fall. You know, now we'll be looking at, you know, probably mid to late next summer, and ultimately you've got, you know, the excitement of the permitting, and again, you know, it's hard to. We had access to some geological studies related to that, but you never know when you're going to run into situations when you're trying to bury, and most of the time we're trying to bury our facilities to make them, again, future proof.
I don't think I can add much more to what Brett and Justin have already said, but it's really about the higher deployment costs and the things that these gentlemen have just mentioned, that really at this point, some of that goes beyond our control. And with BEAD happening at the same time for us, and with us all being on the same timeline, there's a lot of competition for resources. So
thank you. So back to the group. Any questions for our panelists? All right, let's continue in that same vein, because as you deploy your networks in the communities, and it sounds like preference for fiber all around, which is great. How are you involving those local municipalities? What role do they play in your deployments in the communities that you're in? And are they able to help mitigate any of the challenges you've mentioned before?
I can jump in quick, and then so I think for us, you know, as we're working with the community, so the good news is for us, for the EACAM, it's areas that we've either been in for a very long time in the situation with our Wood County Exchange, or areas where we've had, you know, long-term relationships with the communities that we serve. So with that, I think, you know, a couple of things that we do is, obviously one of the things is just getting that messaging out. So like in our Manual Exchange, we actually purchased that entity in 2016, and so you know, it's one of those examples where, you know, the original ACAM dollars was a 10-year spend where we would get those funds over 10 years, you know, but sitting down, I remember sitting down with the mayor at the time and just explaining that, you know, building out fiber doesn't happen overnight. And so we are, you know, 8 years into that process, and we have, well, we're not quite, 8 years, and we have one more year left, and we'll complete it about a year early in that situation. But getting them to help reinforce that messaging and be able to, you know, understand that process takes time is one of the biggest concerns. And then the other thing we try and do, like over in Wisconsin Rapids, is we try and partner. So we have local municipal water and light that we a lot of times will go joint with in that situation. So trying to just bury once. There, we do have a fair amount of aerial facilities in Wisconsin Rapids proper. And so as they continue to put their electrical cables down in the ground, we'll do that same thing and really go joint with the cost structure of that. And either we'll do it for them or they'll do it for us, but it allows us to move those facilities to a much more, easier to support and less likely to lose service in the future. But it allows us to only have the cost split between, the two of us. But so just a couple examples I could think of.
Anything to add, Angie or Brett?
I guess, just we have partnered with, like for one example, in our RDOF, was we partnered with Iowa County, which is south of the Wisconsin River. Sauk County is north of the Wisconsin River. So a pretty good barrier there for getting fiber across. Iowa County has been really, has a goal and has been really, trying to find ways to get basically, like they say, is try to get what Reedsburg has or what Sauk County has in Iowa County. And I know they've worked with some other telecom providers, Bug Tussle and Mount Horeb Telecom, to cover areas, but the northern part of Iowa County has been a struggle for them. So we actually partnered with them. They gave us basically enough incentives to make it affordable for us to cross, to jump the river, I guess. So there are, I guess, ways that communities can work with providers. It just is probably going to take some resources of either funding or other sorts of contributions.
I would add, we at TDS, we're in the early stages of engineering our EACAM upgrades, and we'll be reaching out to the communities we serve and collaborating with them as we have more information to share about our construction timelines for EACAM. And we have had discussions with a few communities already, with folks who were interested in what EACAM meant for them, and always happy to have those conversations. And, to Justin's point, I think whether you're talking EACAM or BEAD, for communities looking to work with broadband providers, whatever makes it easy or easier for a company to build and construct a network in the community helps the process go much more smoothly for everyone. And I think, again, to Justin's great point around helping us educate the community about what's involved with constructing a fiber network and the timelines around that, and helping manage those expectations.
That's actually a really good segue. If there are questions, please put your hand up or throw a note in the chat so we can call on you. I have one other question here, though, that I think follows up with that. So as you've worked through deployments of different federal programs like this in the past, are there lessons you've learned from that you think we should be aware of from a BEAD standpoint, and looking to make any types of changes or recommendations about things that would work better in hindsight after having gone through RDOF or ACAM in the past? Less reporting, maybe. Yeah.
Well, I think Brett brought up, a good example in the sense that RDOF was, probably the poster child for how not to do federal funding in that situation, where, when you have some of the biggest winners in the country not do the build, and that just puts everyone, further behind, where, there was big portions of the state that would have been built out as part of that requirement that now are falling back to the BEAD requirements. And so, some of the takeaways that, Brett already highlighted a couple of them, but, that concept of a reverse auction when you don't have, I don't know, a good way of saying, validated bidders really is what happened. It'd be like if you went into a casino and you said, I'm good for $1 million, and they let you bet that $1 million and then they checked you at the door and believe it or not, you didn't have the $1 million. You know, that's kind of the situation that happened, very much oversimplified. And, you know, in that situation, it hurt the entire process because there were companies. So we bid on that, and in certain situations, we bid down to a point where we couldn't make the dollars and cents work. But there was, you know, people that actually couldn't make the dollars and cents work, and they were awarded the funds. And so in that situation, you know, I think the trick is cost is always a concern, and getting the, you know, ultimately getting those government funds to go as far as humanly possible is always the motivation. But there's got to be some, you know, weight on, you know, past success of those companies that end up getting awarded those funds, just to ensure that it truly happens. You know, it's not about awarding funds, it's about hooking up subscribers with broadband at the end of the day, and that is the intention. But there's an awful lot of times that government programs don't make it over the finish line in the broadband world. And you know, the original CAF funding that came out to some of the larger providers in the States is another example where ultimately there was, you know, a couple of providers that, you know, never finished their builds and got the money except for the last 2 years of their requirements. So, you know, this has to be a situation where we are able to put those funds to work and truly get the end result. You know, I guess that's the thing we always have to stay focused on, you know, but.
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing, and kind of, yeah, just exactly what Justin was talking about, is that we get the funds where they need to be to deploy the fiber. I mean, ultimately, as providers, we just want to turn up customers and provide a good service. And I guess it's getting more and more frustrating that there's just continues to be more and more red tape associated with these funds. You know, and that's just driving up our costs. And then ultimately, the money associated with this funding does not go to, either it's not getting put towards actually putting fiber in the ground, or and not serving customers. You know, some of the state broadband grants, if unfortunately, I mean, I think one of our first grants, the grant agreement was maybe 12 pages long. I think the last one was 50 some pages long. And, you know, and so then it just makes it, there's delays in getting the funding back after we've deployed the fiber, which then drives up our costs because we're paying interest on those amounts. And then it's slowing down our other projects because we don't have those funds back in our hands. So I guess those are lessons on the regulatory side to keep in mind with the speed deployment. I think, at least on our end, low interest loans are very important for matching funds. So I don't know if the BEAD funding could have a grant/loan components to it. Because there's been so many grant funds thrown out there that had matching requirements. So smaller providers have used up a lot of their matching funds, and it takes a while for those revenues to build those reserves back up. And then, you know, I guess, and the only other thing on a provider side is just plan for inflation, because I think it's going to be out there. And you know, plan for inventory. And I guess as an example, in 2020, our inventory was about $470,000 when we bid on RDOF. Right now, we have built our inventory up to $4.9 million to plan for these projects. So,
Would it be fair to say that another problem for all of these is the difficulty of getting adoption programs in as part of the grant funding or as part of the partnership abilities? You know, whether RDOF, you know, again, still poster child, but you know, for all programs so far, I think it sounds like we need to do a lot more work on adoption. given the stupendously high price per mile for fiber and high-speed wireless.
Yeah, and what you're getting at, Bob, is like ultimately the business case we put together whenever we do these situations. One of the biggest factors that we have to factor in is what that adoption rate is going to be. And in areas where there's no or little competition because they're high cost areas, usually you're getting the majority of the market, but the majority of the market in certain rural areas is not 100% of the homes you pass in that situation. Depending on where you are in the state, we estimate somewhere around 80 to 85% of homes are interested in having broadband in those rural areas, and that means that there's the whole pie is not 100%, and so you ultimately have to take that into consideration when you're figuring out that business case as well. But
Yeah, I mean, from the provider's perspective, it starts out as take rate, but programs that provide money to boost adoption, may save us from some of the mistakes of the past grant programs, especially on the federal side.
And just to weigh in on that, I mean, in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, which there's plenty of, there's a high rate of seasonal customers as well. And so when you're talking about 2 to 4 homes per square mile and half of those are seasonal, and you really only have a 60 to 80% interest out of the rest, that really makes that a tough business case.
Or somebody says, thank you for giving me multi-gig fiber, but I don't need something that's fast. How can I get a discount given that I'm served on fiber for a slower speed? Well, not for a lower cost, but maybe that could be part of an adoption extra in some program. I don't know if BEAD looks at that perfectly, but that's something that I'll be trying to scratch my head on.
We've found that in areas where we overbuilt our fixed wireless with fiber, the percentage of people that flip to the fiber is relatively low, much lower than our expectation, because they feel that the speed that they're getting is adequate for what they're doing. Now, if we can provide them additional education and services on what more they can do with fiber, we're slowly flipping some of those. But, there's a process with that, and there's a process with affordability too. If you can, get this service at $40 and this one's costing you $62 and you're on a tight budget, you stay with the $40 fixed wireless instead of jumping to the $62 fiber. So there's just some, interesting factors. I agree that I think that the whole adoption issues are, going to grow as we get more and more accessibility, because then it comes down to how do we pay for this stuff if we have a 40% adoption rate instead of an 85% adoption rate.
This is a great discussion. We're creeping up at 2:30. I know we've got some other items on the agenda. Any last questions for our panelists before we thank them for their time?
Hi, this is Sal Carranza. I mean, really excellent conversation. Talking about the last part, the adoption part. I understand that some people might not want to adopt at this time. Do you see or envision any moment in the future, as in many other things, as technology advances, that more people will be not just have a choice, but have to actually choose to move to fiber, because of everything, technology is moving so fast that it'll come a point when right now there might be a 40%, but it might get to 85, 90% as technology and the things that they can use technology for grows.
We see that just as a natural progression sometimes too, where, grandma and grandpa pass away and sell the farmhouse and they didn't have a need, but now a young couple moves in and they absolutely have a need. Or, there's a farm on the edge of town that is a small farm that chooses not to have fiber, and then the kids sell the farm and a development goes in, and now you have tremendous needs. So it's intriguing.
So it might be even worth it, just the wait period until that happens. I don't know. It's worth thinking about it.
One other thought as we transition to our next topic, Wisconsin's had a lot of fairly negative healthcare news in the last month, between Marshfield Clinic shutting down a number of facilities, or not facilities, but services in northern Wisconsin. And earlier this week, HSHS announcing they're shutting down everything in western Wisconsin, focusing on eastern Wisconsin. My old world of telehealth seems to be a solution to a lot of people who are going to lack access to healthcare now. And that oftentimes results in that phone call that says, I need that access now because my appointment's tomorrow. I didn't need it yesterday because I didn't think I'd ever need it. Now I do. So while that's bad news from a healthcare access standpoint, hopefully it does have some impact on driving adoption down the road. Thank you to all of our panelists for your time today and your expertise and sharing it with us. We appreciate it. We're glad to have you as part of our task force too. All right, we will move on then. The next item on the agenda is a group discussion, and Kristen is going to help facilitate that for us. We have about 20 minutes, and we probably do have a little bit more time, Kristen, because we are a little early here coming out of the panel. And I will hand it over to Kristen to talk about the questions that were sent in our invite and what we'll be doing in our groups. Kristen?
Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate it. Wow, that was really great presentations and discussions, and I think it's going to fuel the two items that we have. So this discussion is, as all of our task force member discussions are, it has a Google Doc component. I'll share my screen for those of you that don't have access to Google Docs, but I put the link into the chat. Feel free, if you're a task force member, to navigate over there and participate. And just as a reminder, this is a discussion for the task force members themselves. I know we have quite a few members of the public here, and we're always accepting comments via email or during the public comment period. But we're going to mine some of our task force members for ideas for the remainder of the year right now. And in the past, we've sometimes gone into small groups. We'd like to keep this as a large group discussion today, if that's all right with the members. And we have two questions. We'll pose them sequentially, but the first one is, what are one or two things that you would like to learn more about related to broadband digital equity, digital equity, affordability, internet for all, or other goals of the task force? And I know we just talked about adoption, and I'm not sure if I remember the last time we had that as a formal presentation about factors around adoption. Our second question, we'll spend 10 minutes on that first one. And then second question, what are one or two recommendations that you think the task force should make in our 2024 annual report to the governor and the legislature? And this can be a specific recommendation. It can be something from our previous reports, or it can be a broad general recommendation that maybe we should look at this as a topic to make a recommendation around. But really with these two, what we're trying to do is make sure that our next few months are spent productively, and then keeping the end in mind as we're beginning our discussions in this calendar year, but still finishing up our 2023-2024 work, making sure that we are headed towards that final report with recommendations that we've thought a lot about over the past few months. So with that, let's open it up for discussion. I will be taking notes, and feel free to drop your cursor in if you're a task force member, and also add notes as we go along. I love this group activity of all of us working on a Google Doc together. What are one or two things that you would like to learn about, task force members, related to broadband, digital equity, affordability, internet for all, or any of the other goals of the task force, or other items that are related to broadband that might not fall in one of these categories? What ideas do we have?
It's a quiet group today.
It is a thoughtful group today.
I had a suggestion for a topic. With the BEAD and digital equity programs, there were some sub-grants that were awarded to digital equity organizations, and also on the BEAD side, I think it was the Workforce Alliance. It would be interesting to hear what they found during their grants funded work processes and how that's going to inform the work going forward and what they see as their needs going forward.
All right, I'm putting that on our list. Other ideas?
Kristen, as it relates to digital equity, there's new digital discrimination rules recently issued by the FCC. I would love to know more about how those might be applied here in Wisconsin or what implications those might have.
All right, let's put that on our list. You guys are seeing me type in real time. This is not unlike singing karaoke. I'm making spelling mistakes as I'm going about this. Other comments or other ideas or suggestions? These are great.
Kristen, I would like to learn a little bit more about educational programs that might be called into force to boost demand through you know, the access to you know, finding jobs. If you are on state programs that now absolutely require online access as opposed to doing things in person. Any lineup of primary, secondary, and post-secondary education that can be online and let people know that this is how it's going to be. In other words, different ways to funnel money into education for adoption. Consumer education.
Different ways to fund consumer education leading to adoption.
Yeah, thank you. Your typing is perfect.
All right.
Probably as part of existing and maybe future grant opportunities.
Oops. And are you, let's see here.
We see you.
All right, I am attempting to share a screen and
Yep.
it is not
can
working
see
and I
it.
think I've seized up.
It works for us.
Yeah,
Okay.
we see it.
Okay, and you can see a Google Doc?
Yes.
Yeah, not your email. I think Steve got, oh, just kidding. Steve, we don't see your screen anymore, Kristen.
I think you're on mute, Kristen.
Kristen, do you want me to take over typing and let you facilitate? So you
Yeah,
don't have to do two
thank
things
you.
at
That
once?
would be great. As
You
I hit,
facilitate and I will.
thank you.
Right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
as I hit share screen, my entire internet could zoom and I could hear you guys saying that you could see me, but I could not see you or the screen.
I'll take over as note taker.
Thank you. I am, sometimes in this group, we demonstrate the need for more robust broadband, do we not? All right, so more ideas for topics that we should cover.
You know, one thing, and I'm not quite sure how to state this, but as we all proceed with putting more fiber in, you know, I have an old map on my wall from like 1990 that shows the fiber in the state, and it's you know, from a middle mile perspective. I think it would be interesting to explore how the routes have changed and diversity capability happens, because, you know, having been in the wireless industry, there are a lot of cell towers that couldn't get on diverse routes that with all of the fiber going in now can get on diverse routes. And so there are just a lot of industry-wide connectivity that's occurring as a result of all of the programs and the great work being done that increases the reliability of the networks in addition to the accessibility. So I'm not quite sure how to state what I said there, but hopefully that makes some degree of sense.
So let me see if I can summarize it. A new look at updated coverage maps with a focus on how interconnectivity is increasing reliability? Or there
Yeah,
might
I
be-
think particularly as it relates to middle mile and long haul routes going through the state, you know, very often in the past, northern Wisconsin, if somebody had a fiber cut, you know, all of northern Wisconsin went down. There are now, you know, alternate routes coming down from Rhineland or coming down from Leona, coming down from, you know, Norvado's area, you know, that should create significant incremental reliability, you know, as well as the accessibility.
More robust network is what we hope. Excellent. Thank you, Steve. Barbara has a comment and then I'll go to you, Gail. Barbara in chat has said, I'd love to learn more about the implementation side of BEAD, from Buy America requirements to resources to help identify state and federal agencies that might need approval for projects. While we know ISPs are responsible and have the expertise, I wonder if there's a baseline understanding that can provide those municipalities who do not have dedicated staff. NTIA has started a streamlining process, and can the state mirror something like this? And then there is a link in there. Thank you, Barbara. That would be great. Gail.
I think along that same line of implementation phase, taking a look, I think it's important that this group takes kind of an assessment and hears from folks of what the pain points are as we start to implement, from both the provider perspective, but also for communities, to see where we might make recommendations to help smooth that process.
Thank you, Gail. And other comments or suggestions? We've got a good list going here. Sal.
At the beginning of the presentation, we heard about, you know, Rory mentioned all this federal funding that is available, but is not managed by us. And we talked about how can we leverage with our managed funds those that the federal level has available, and how can we make it less burdensome for providers, as we heard, with our state funds, so that they have a little more ability to do what they need to do. So how can we, you know, leverage what the federal funds are with our state funds in a way that makes it easier for providers to be able to work?
Thank you, Sal. Great suggestion. Maximizing those dollars as best we can. All right, other suggestions? And if something comes to you at 8 o'clock tonight, please do, don't hesitate. Send us an email and let us know. Conversations like this often inspire us to come up with ideas or arrive at ideas that we might not have at the actual meeting. Looking at the time, let's jump to the next question. So what are 1 or 2 recommendations, and this can be a specific recommendation, a general recommendation, perhaps a topic that we should look at for a recommendation, that you think the task force should make in our 2024 annual report to the governor and the legislature? And while that is months away on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's only months away. So Gail, I see your hand up.
Yep, I just want to kind of bounce off of some of the things that Brett was saying, that some of that capital is hard to come by. And so I think one of our recommendations needs to be to look at, as Brett was talking, maybe of options for that low interest loans, or maybe even looking at some of the philanthropy or different things that we can do to help leverage those funds and make them go as far as possible.
Excellent. Thank you, Gail. Those matching funds are difficult for a lot of communities and our smaller providers, as well as we talked about today. Other suggestions and specific suggestions, broad categories, topics, items from the last few years that might still be current and every bit as relevant today as they were when we made them last year or the year before.
Kristen, this is Chris. One thing, we talk about the affordable connectivity plan and some of the subsidies around broadband that aid with adoption. And of course, I think we should definitely, when necessary, put recommendations to maintain that into our report. But I'm wondering if in conversations that the PSC staff have, they find research talking about the impacts of the ACP. Specifically, you know, if it was $10 less per month, 25,000 Wisconsinites wouldn't be able to have internet access, stuff like that, that tells us a little bit more about the workings of the ACP and what it's actually facilitating. If there's anything you see like that, I think that would be very interesting to see at the task force level too.
Excellent. That's a great suggestion. We can put evidence behind some of our recommendations. It's always easier for them to be adopted. Other suggestions?
One of the things that the ACP program does is give a make it possible to get a payment for devices. Is that something that the state or that is there a state opportunity to contribute to that type of incentive? Again, I'm coming at this thinking about it from the adoption perspective, because if I don't have, or if I don't think I can afford a device, I may postpone a decision to adopt, as opposed to once I've got it and I start seeing all of the things that I can use the broadband connection for.
Yeah, it's a question of equity. I know we've had these conversations with the Digital Equity Group, our partners, and we've mentioned it before, but recommendations around that, absolutely. Other ideas, other categories or topics or specific suggestions?
Kristen, something that I've probably talked about in the task force before is there a role that DPI can play as it relates to adoption?
One of our biggest partners when it comes to broadband, DPI, for sure. Thank you, Chad. Other comments, other ideas, things that we should be looking at? All right. I think we'll probably revisit this question periodically over the next few months as we're shaping or working towards shaping a report. Again, as with the other question, if you have ideas or are inspired or something occurs to you tonight, tomorrow, or next week, please do email the suggestion, and we'll be sure to include it in the notes and in our meeting for next month. With that, I think we're ending a little bit early, not quite 20 minutes, but conversation seems to have reached a natural. Oh, Rory, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to take the hand off there, Kristen. I think, for some context for some new members of the task force, every year we pull together kind of a governor's task force report. It really pulls together both, the meetings we've had, the topics we've discussed, some of the things we've learned about, but it also brings together the recommendations. And this is a nice list we've already started to churn together. I think bringing together recommendations, policy priorities, but also, maybe some recommended tweaks if there's things we can do better or think about in a different way, pulling that all together to kind of a cohesive report that we present to the governor and legislature by June 30th. And so I think, this is just a start, but over the next couple months, me, Mark, Alyssa, other members of the team, we'll take this list back and start chewing on it a little bit. But we really would love your feedback throughout the process. And I think this report is the report of the task force. So our goal is to capture your mindset, your thoughts, your ideas, your goals. And so please keep that churning in the back of your mind as we have these next couple meetings, and certainly some more topics and agendas and things to talk about. But, keep that in mind as we go forward, because I always find there's a lot of thoughts and ideas that come together, and lots to pack into a report. So it's nice to get a head start like we have here today. With that, maybe I can pass it over to Chris and we can start wrapping up.
You bet. So our next meeting is going to be coming up on February 21st. It's a week after Valentine's Day for those of you keeping track of that sort of thing. And our meetings will be on the third Wednesday of the month moving forward. And that does bring us to the close of our agenda today. So Rory, Alyssa, or Mark, any final comments from you?
I just think it was a great conversation. Thanks to the panels for bringing insight on their projects. And again, from the task force on bringing their ideas, again, from reading last year's task force report, same themes. I'm seeing digital equity, adoption, affordability, and education, which are all very important, and we can really hit that home and get an early start on the report. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for your time and involvement today. I just quick side note, I just led strategic planning in my organization, and I sat through a lot of awkward silences waiting for people to speak. That's not usually a problem here. So I appreciate your engagement in our conversations. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks all.
Good to see everyone.
Yep, bye.